All right, in an impossible challenge, I will try to keep the lawyers brief. On the docket, we have three legal stories related to the presidential elections. I want to start with Donald Trump threatening Hillary Clinton during Sunday's debate.
If I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
It's funnier than the SNL bits if it wasn't so scary. All right, now people on both sides of the aisle, they're agreeing on this one, that Trump didn't step over the line, he leapfrogged it, including,
I disagree
of course you do, Mark, including former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff, who was appointed by George W. Bush, saying, quote, "It's a chilling thought. It smacks of what we read about in tin pot dictators in third world countries."
Oh, it's so breathless.
Stop it. When they win an election, their first move to imprison opponents. All right, let's bring in our legal panel. You've already heard one voice here, the polite ones who waited their term. Jim Kostoris, criminal defense attorney of Manhattan, sitting on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country.
Mark is here.
Yes, he is, and the noisy one, Mark Furnish, but we'll get to him last after what he did. Mayo Bartlett, though, the good one, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. And yes, noisy Mark Furnish, a professor at Brooklyn Law. He's argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. Yes, you win, Mark, so I'll start with you. You can't have political candidates threatening to jail their opponents because they don't like them.
Listen, of course you can do it. He is perfectly entitled to instruct a subordinate member of his own executive branch, the head of the Justice Department, to reopen an investigation if he has reason to believe that the first investigation was botched or corrupt. He's wholly within his rights.
What reason does he believe that? He reads a
maybe
newspaper?
Because Bill Clinton met with Loretta Lynch 2 days before the announcement was made. Maybe because the Wall Street...
So now he believes that our Justice Department's corrupt.
Wait a minute. Maybe because he believes, from reading the Wall Street Journal, that Obama coordinated with Clinton on the response to the missing emails.
You're going to have to give me some leeway today for time. Okay. Anybody else want to jump on this one?
He's allowed to do it.
Before I go after Plaid Man here?
He's not allowed to instruct. He can recommend that an investigation be reopened.
Yes.
And he cannot threaten that if he were in charge of law enforcement in this country, that she'd be in jail.
He's allowed to reopen. A grand jury then decides if there's probable cause to indict. A petit jury decides whether to convict.
Do you understand the chilling thing that you're saying here?
It's not chilling
can you
at
explain
all.
to him why
it happens every day when they do these civil rights investigations.
Go ahead.
Obama instructs them to open an investigation.
Speak over him.
It's great that Donald Trump suggests this stuff, but the reality is that this will never happen if Donald Trump...
Because he's not going to win. That's why
if
it's
he
never
wins,
going
it
to
won't
happen.
ever happen, because he knows that the minute he leaves office, he would be the subject of a prosecution, as virtually every American president could be by the time they finish their tenure.
No, this is a little...
You can't have politicians threatening others. You can't have what he's already done to the Times and Washington Post threatened here, that he's going to have a sued for libel. Of course, he never follows through on that. I'd love to be there for the discovery proceedings.
He can
But
exclude them from his private rallies.
But you know what? You can't attack the press if you don't like them.
Yes, you can.
Can't
They
threaten
attack him.
He threatened to jail him. You can't threaten to jail your political opponent if you don't like her.
Well, the bottom line, Rich, is that he can...
It's America.
He can speak his mind as a citizen, but really what he's doing is just derailing his candidacy, because what
the
he is
tapes
saying...
derailed his candidacy.
Well,
They get a head start before those
response,
tapes, but yeah.
This is business as usual with him.
All right.
He's allowed to do it.
Let's get on to the next one here. Ever since the release of those tapes that Mark referenced, where Trump caught on an open mic talking about saying he did sexually abuse women, there's been tons of speculation. There are more tapes out there. Now, it's not just, here or there mumbles that I'll hear, but you have apprentice producers reportedly have said they've seen worse than what you heard here, including him using the N-word liberally. Now, of course, everybody wants to see if it's true, but they're saying don't hold your breath, for the reason is that this is what one of the owners of the footage says. MGM owns Mark Burnett's production company, and The Apprentice is one of their properties. Despite reports to the contrary, Mark Burnett does not have the ability nor the right to release footage or other material from The Apprentice. Various contractual and legal requirements also restrict MGM's ability to release such material. Cop out, Doug, or is there, it's there in the vault, and if somebody leaks it, doesn't matter, MGM's on the hook?
Well, we know that if somebody leaks it, then everybody can get, take it and play it on the news shows and everything. But somebody owns this. Somebody put in money. They made these shows. They own the footage. They paid people to shoot it. So it's their property. They have a right not to put it out there.
There's no doubt it's legitimate, and this Gloria Allred, or whatever her name is trying to encourage some rogue to go out there and leak it. Here's what I say to Gloria Allred. Sue somebody for it. Let's see if any court in the world finds that you have standing to bring the lawsuit, and let's see if any court in the world will circumvent an agreement.
Well,
Fair
the
enough.
Russians could just hack into it and release it.
Well,
No,
that's what
but
she's
more
trying to
seriously,
do.
there have been some deep-pocketed folks to say, go ahead and release it. Reportedly, there's a $5 million penalty if anything is released here. You do it, I'll write the check, and then some. If there shows to be basically...
So she's encouraging people to
Not
break
she,
the law.
somebody else, okay?
And you don't think that Donald Trump can strike back at that? People are actively encouraging
That's what I was
others
asking
to break the
Jimmy.
law.
If, let's say, a person says, oh, $5 million, and $2 million topper on that, so they'll cover the exposure and something more, sure, I'll do it. Could somebody turn around and say, wait a minute here, there was a reason I signed this agreement the way it was. Now it's damages beyond that. Can you go beyond the 5?
Well, you can go beyond the 5, especially because it would be calculated and malicious, but not for nothing, it would be bad for business. Okay, the notion that certain property that is protected contractually not to be disclosed, the disclosure can now be purchased, is bad for business.
Okay, Mayo, let me bring you back to your former days. You define bias better than anyone I know. What if on those tapes, as rumor has it, you have him using the N-word and saying horrific things? Is there a line at all, or a speech, all of it, not only protected, but protected even where you could say it's not in the national interest? You could say at a presidential election you want to know who you're voting for or whatever else. Is there any leg somebody could stand on that would make it justifiable beyond morally or ethically them releasing the tapes?
In order to release the tapes?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, basically, your conversations that you have in private in particular are protected. And the more private the conversation, the more protection you have. You can't go into a movie theater and scream fire, things like that, because it causes a risk to the public. But his communication with an individual in private doesn't cause that risk.
Let me ask everybody something. Is it anything preventing somebody who witnessed these comments from coming out and saying...
Not at all.
I
Depends.
witnessed them?
Well-
The participants in the reality show are bound by these contracts. There's non-disclosure agreements. Some rogue is going to release some of this, and that's the goal of it, and they'll take the consequences.
But
Okay,
that depends on whether they're signatory to this
Yeah,
to
that's
the
exactly
agreement.
what
If
it
you're
is.
not, if you're just there,
In
you
today's
can,
day and age, where all of you, all of us have our cell phones here, if somebody recorded it separately beyond the air checks of it, then we get into a fuzzy world. Okay. Now, we've all been seeing the Clinton campaign emails, and before that, the DNC emails that have been released by WikiLeaks. Now, Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta, he's saying you don't have to look too far as to where this is coming from.
I think it's a reasonable assumption or at least a reasonable conclusion, that Mr. Stone had advance warning in the Trump campaign, had advance warning about what Assange was going to do.
Now, work with me on a hypothetical. First off, we do know, and I spoke about this with Dominic a little bit earlier, we do know in the national security briefings, they clearly say that the hacks were being directed or being facilitated out of Russia. Forget what Donald Trump says, we don't know who was doing this, some 400-pound guy in his parents' basement. We do know Russia had fingerprints all over it. Work with me in my hypothetical that we can directly draw a link between what Assange was doing with some pre-coordination with people within the Trump campaign. It's illegal to hack. Obviously, this is a foreign national doing it. What about if you're a political campaign and you coordinate? Are you aiding and abetting a crime if you're facilitating that information?
It's illegal, and not only does the person who directly does it commit a crime, but as we all know, there are conspiracies, there's aiding and abetting. If you, with the intent to do the hacking, coordinate with somebody to do it and then release it, then you are a participant in the crime. I think the murkier thing is if you're not the one responsible for the hacking,
Right.
but then you're coordinating when it would be released, now that's a different story. So if the Trump campaign was coordinating with them to release it to Trump's benefit, and again, these are only allegations,
Absolutely.
but if that is
No, they're
what
not
happened,
even
that's a
allegations. They're supposition is what they
Right.
are. And
Fair enough.
this is
And
a guy
if I didn't- and I
this is a
didn't-
guy who's extremely on the defensive and is just throwing stuff back the same way that Trump was on the defensive about the other tapes and was throwing stuff back. It's really disgusting on both sides. Let's face it. It's disgraceful.
I think it's extremely disgusting on one side, but that for a political conversation.
It's pretty disgusting what's coming out in those emails because they have ramifications for national security, where this is just really bad off-color remarks.
And also, Rich, you know, in law they have the clean hands doctrine.
Yeah.
You don't hear about the U.S.
What is that?
Well, basically, you can't make a charge against somebody if you're doing the same thing. That's basically it. And you never hear the discussion whether the U.S. is hacking into other people's emails.
Of course we're hacking into other
And
people's. The PRISM
this
program is
Podesta,
designed
his
to
boss
hack.
is Hillary Clinton, who is the State Department. So
But
we
why
have.
couldn't I, Doug, say clearly, and again, Mark said it right, it's not even, it's a complete supposition,
even
zero
talk about it.
evidence to it. No, but I want to know this, because obviously in today's digital age here, clearly hacking, there's cybersecurity, there's national security implications of this. If somebody is using intelligence and information, which they clearly are, to impact an election, no one's debating that much. But it is being facilitated or coordinated with someone else. Even if you have nothing to do with the hacking, but you're working on its coordination, again, to impact
What do
a
you mean
federal
it's
election.
coordination? What do you mean by its coordination?
He's got a data dump. He knows what he's got. And they figure out what they're going to time for the 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out to the weekend before the election.
It's possible that somebody could be charged federally under a statute called 18 U.S. Code 3 as an accessory after the fact, but you wouldn't be tagged then with the original hack. That would be a very strained application of
But
that
what about if
statute.
this isn't just, espionage as it relates to work, stealing trade secrets, but now you're influencing a federal election? If that is the intent here, not just trying to get some patent secret here, but influencing a federal election, and if a campaign's involved with that, to me that's a lot worse than breaking into the Watergate offices to try and find, campaign strategies. I mean, again, I'm not saying this is happening, but to me, you could easily see this happening down the road.
You can make a mail or wire fraud case against anybody if the goal of that fraud is to influence the outcome of an election. You would have I'm not going to get into the
Right.
minutiae
All
of the
right.
laws, but you would have a difficult problem making that case.
Let's
stick.
leave the dirty word of politics here and, in fact, get to policing and new approaches. When we come back, some remarkable comments from James O'Neill. He is the new NYPD commissioner. It was part apology, part policy speech, part community outreach. We're going to unpack it and see if it makes sense. Stay with us.